My name is Michael, and I'm 29 years old. If there's one thing I've always believed, it's that weddings are obligations rather than celebrations. You attend because you have to, not because you want to. They're filled with endless toasts that drag on forever, relatives you can't quite place but are forced to politely greet, and music that is always just a little too loud. When my cousin invited me to his wedding, I accepted out of duty. I told myself it would be just another night to endure, sit at the far end of the hall, sip quietly on a drink, and wait until it was socially acceptable to leave. But life, as I would come to realize, doesn't ask for our permission when it decides to change everything. That night, in the middle of clinking glasses and polite laughter, something shifted for me. I didn't know at the time, but the air already carried that strange electricity that precedes the moments we'll remember forever. The hall itself was decorated beautifully. White roses draped across the tables, golden ribbons tied to the chairs, chandeliers casting warm light that reflected off crystal glasses. People around me were buzzing with chatter, excitement, and the anticipation of celebration. I was an outsider in my own family's event, choosing a seat at the very back, far from the main action. I wanted to disappear into the background. That was my plan. And then, in one unassuming moment, I looked across the room and saw her. She was sitting at a table opposite mine, dressed in a light blue dress that seemed to catch every glimmer of the chandelier's light. There was something effortless about her presence, like she wasn't trying to stand out, but the world had no choice but to notice her anyway. She was laughing at something someone said, her eyes crinkling slightly at the corners, and for reasons I couldn't explain, it felt as though the entire hall had dimmed just to spotlight her smile. Our eyes met, just briefly, and yet, in that single second, something inside me shifted. A spark, an unfamiliar flutter that felt both thrilling and unsettling. I looked away almost instantly, telling myself not to be ridiculous. But later, when I glanced back, I found her gaze on me again. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a fleeting glance. It was deliberate, curious, and it made my pulse quicken in a way I hadn't felt in years. I remember thinking, this isn't what I came here for. This isn't supposed to happen. And yet, deep down, some quiet part of me already knew I wouldn't leave this wedding the same person who had walked in. The speeches began not long after our eyes first met. I should have been listening, nodding politely, clapping at the right moments, but my attention was hopelessly divided. Every so often, I would glance across the hall, only to find her doing the same. It was like a quiet game, a silent rhythm only the two of us seemed aware of. Each time our gazes collided, there was a flicker of something unspoken, something neither of us dared name. The bride and groom had their first dance, the kind of perfectly rehearsed moment people cheer for, but my mind wasn't on them. My table companions laughed, clinked glasses, shared stories I couldn't quite follow, but I was absent. My focus was across the room, on the girl in blue whose presence seemed to outshine every candle in the hall. After the dance ended, the crowd shifted, and with it came the usual chaos. Relatives eager to get to the buffet, children darting between tables, aunts waving their arms for group photos. The noise swelled. I excused myself quietly, slipping outside for some fresh air. The night was cool, a thin breeze carrying away the stuffy warmth of the reception. And there she was. She stood near the stone fountain in the courtyard, her posture relaxed, one hand loosely holding a glass of champagne. The light from the building spilled onto her, highlighting the soft waves of her hair, the gentle outline of her figure. For a moment, I froze, debating whether to approach her or retreat into the shadows like I always did at social events. My heart beat so loudly it almost drowned out the music seeping from inside. Finally, I forced myself forward. Each step felt heavier than it should have, but when I reached her side, the words came out before I had time to reconsider. "Looks like we're both not exactly thrilled with the music," I said, aiming for lighthearted. My voice wavered just enough to betray my nerves. She turned to me, surprised at first, then amused. Her laugh was soft, genuine, the kind of laugh that eases the tension in your shoulders instantly. "True," she said, tilting her head slightly. "But now, at least, I found some pleasant company. It was such a simple reply, but it unraveled me. The way she looked at me when she said it, as though the words carried more weight than politeness usually allows, it was enough to quiet my restless thoughts. In that moment, I knew I didn't want to go back inside. I wanted to stay there, with her in the cool night air where the music was faint and everything felt oddly suspended in time. We stood by the fountain as if the rest of the wedding had ceased to exist. Around us, voices rose and fell. Laughter spilled out into the courtyard, and the faint thud of bass pulsed through the walls of the hall. But within that small circle of light, there was only her and me. Our conversation started cautiously, as most conversations with strangers do. I asked her about her work, just to keep the silence away. She spoke with an ease I hadn't expected, describing her days with a mixture of honesty and humor. She admitted that her job could be routine, sometimes even exhausting, but she had this way of finding small joys in it, things that most people would overlook. The way she explained it, I could almost see the passion hidden beneath the everyday complaints. When she turned the question back on me, I found myself talking more than I usually do. I spoke of traveling, how I loved getting lost in unfamiliar streets, how I sought out corners of the world most tourists ignored. Normally, I told these stories lightly, skipping over details, but with her I went deeper. I described the smell of food stalls in Istanbul, the quiet beauty of a forgotten temple in Cambodia, the way a sudden rainstorm in Florence had once left me stranded under the awning of a stranger's shop. She listened intently, as though my memories mattered to her, as though she could see the world through my eyes. Time blurred. I don't know how long we stood there, trading words, but it felt like we had slipped into some hidden pocket of existence. Inside the hall, voices grew louder, someone announcing a game, the clinking of utensils, the shuffle of chairs, but we didn't move. Neither of us seemed willing to surrender this bubble of calm. And then, as though the night itself had conspired to keep us close, the first raindrops began to fall. They were light at first, cool little pinpricks on my skin. She looked up, smiling faintly, as if the rain amused her. Within moments, it grew steadier, forcing us to retreat beneath the veranda. We ran together, laughing at the sudden downpour, her hand clutching the hem of her dress to keep it from brushing the wet ground. Under the shelter, we stood shoulder to shoulder, the rain forming a curtain around us. Water drummed against the roof, drowning out the distant music, leaving only the sound of the storm and the rhythm of our breathing. Her hair clung in delicate strands to her face, and without meaning to, I found myself staring. The space between us shrank. Our shoulders brushed, a fleeting touch, but it sent a ripple through me. It wasn't just attraction. It was something heavier, something that felt like recognition. As if the universe had orchestrated every step that had brought us to that exact spot, under that veranda, in that storm. For the first time all evening, I felt a strange certainty. This wasn't an ordinary meeting, and somehow, deep down, I suspected she felt it too. The rain kept falling in steady sheets, and we lingered beneath the veranda, as if the world had deliberately shrunk to the size of that small shelter. The party inside had grown louder. Cheers, shouts, a drunken chorus to some familiar song. But out here, there was only the storm and her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, filled with an invisible weight. I could feel her presence in the way her shoulder brushed mine every so often, in the faint scent of her perfume that mixed with the damp night air. It was delicate, but it stayed with me, curling in my chest like something I wanted to remember. Finally, she broke the silence. "It's strange," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the rain. "You can be in a room full of people and still feel completely out of place." Her words struck me, because I had felt that same way since the moment I arrived. "Yeah," I said. "It's like everyone's caught up in the noise, and you're standing there wondering if you're even meant to be part of it." She looked at me, then really looked, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition. Understanding. It was like she knew exactly what I meant, as if the thought had lived inside her long before I spoke it aloud. We laughed a little after that, Not because anything was particularly funny, but because the conversation had slipped into a kind of intimacy that felt new yet strangely comfortable. She teased me about my habit of traveling alone. Doesn't it ever get lonely wandering from place to place? And I admitted that sometimes, yes, it did. But in the same breath, I told her that solitude had its own kind of freedom. She nodded as though she understood that too. The storm outside intensified. The sound of the rain grew louder, a rhythm that beat against the roof like a drum. We stood so close now that I could feel the faint warmth of her arm against mine. And yet neither of us moved away. The space between us had stopped feeling like space at all. For the first time that night, I didn't want the wedding to end. I didn't care about the food, the music, the laughter echoing behind us. All I wanted was for the rain to keep falling, for the world to keep us tucked away in that quiet bubble where nothing else mattered. She exhaled, almost a sigh, and whispered, "It's a shame this is just one evening." I turned toward her, my heart thudding in my chest. Who says it has to be just one? Her eyes widened just slightly at that. And in the pause that followed, in the way her lips parted but no words came, I felt something shift. Something fragile but real, as though she was daring herself, for the first time in a long while, to believe in the possibility of more. The way she looked at me after I said those words, "Who says it has to be just one?" is something I don't think I'll ever forget. It wasn't dramatic, no sweeping gesture or gasp. It was subtler, more fragile, like watching the first crack of sunlight break through after weeks of rain. Her expression softened, the guardedness in her eyes loosening, and for a moment, she simply studied me, as though weighing whether I was serious. The storm around us seemed determined to seal us into that moment. Rain cascaded down in silver sheets, the sound so loud it drowned out everything else. I could barely hear the muffled thrum of music from the hall anymore. It was just her, me, and the storm wrapping us in its cocoon. She tilted her head slightly, the corners of her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. "You don't even know me," she said. Her tone wasn't dismissive. It was almost hopeful, like she wanted me to argue. "I know enough," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I know you'd rather stand in the rain than sit through another toast. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes. And I know that since the moment I saw you across that room, I haven't been able to stop looking." For a second, I worried I'd gone too far, laid myself too bare. But she didn't look away. Instead, her smile widened just a little, though I could see the flicker of uncertainty still in her gaze. She wasn't someone who trusted easily. That much I could tell. And yet, she was still there, still standing close enough that our shoulders touched every time either of us breathed. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the courtyard for the briefest moment. She turned back toward the rain, her glass of champagne forgotten on the stone ledge beside her. "It feels like this night isn't real," she murmured. "Like tomorrow I'll wake up and it'll all just vanish." Her words echoed something deep inside me, because I had the same fear that this fragile connection could dissolve with the dawn, swallowed by reality. "Then maybe we shouldn't let it vanish," I said. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she simply let the silence stretch between us, her gaze fixed on the rain. But I could feel it, the shift in the air, the quiet admission in the way she didn't step away, the way her body leaned just slightly toward mine. The thought struck me then, sharp and undeniable. Whatever this was, however fleeting, it was real. And I wasn't ready to let go of it. The rain was relentless, hammering against the roof of the veranda until it drowned out everything else. Yet, despite the storm, there was a stillness between us. The kind of stillness that comes when two people realize they're on the edge of something they can't quite name. I wanted to reach for her hand. The impulse was there, electric, urging me forward. But something held me back. Not fear exactly, but reverence. As if moving too quickly might shatter the fragile spell the night had cast over us. So instead, I let the space linger, memorizing the way the damp air curled her hair into loose strands, the way her eyes followed the rain as though searching for answers hidden within its fall. "You're different," she said suddenly, breaking the quiet. I turned to her, caught off guard. "Different how?" Her lips curved into that half-smile again, but her eyes carried something heavier. Most people come to weddings chasing the noise, wanting to be seen, to laugh the loudest, to dance until they forget themselves. But you look like you were hoping no one would notice you at all. I almost laughed, though it wasn't really funny. You're not wrong, I admitted. I came here tonight fully prepared to disappear into the background. And then I hesitated, searching for the right words. And then I saw you. Her gaze softened, but she shook her head gently, almost in disbelief. You make it sound like fate. Maybe it is, I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And though I half expected her to laugh or dismiss it, she didn't. She just looked at me, long and searching, as if trying to decide whether she'd dare believe in something like fate. For a long stretch of moments, we simply stood there, listening to the rain. The courtyard was empty now, the last few stragglers having retreated inside. It felt like the world had folded in on itself, leaving only her and me in its center. I thought about the hundreds of people inside, about how we could so easily have missed each other, how I could have chosen a different seat or stepped outside at a different time. The realization made my chest tighten. Finally, she let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. You talk like this night is going to change everything. I met her eyes. Isn't it already? The way she inhaled sharply told me she felt it too, whether or not she wanted to admit it. And for the first time since I arrived, the thought of tomorrow didn't scare me as much as it should have. Because even if this was fleeting, even if it ended with the sunrise, it was something that had already altered me, something I wasn't willing to let slip away. The storm outside reached its peak, and for a while, neither of us said anything. It wasn't silence in the awkward sense. It was the kind of silence that felt like a language of its own. The rain roared around us. The wind carried the faint scent of wet earth, and every so often, thunder rolled in the distance. Yet none of it mattered compared to the quiet space between us. I found myself studying her in the dim light spilling from the hall windows. The way her lashes cast faint shadows against her cheeks, the delicate rise and fall of her breath. The way she seemed both so present and yet so far away, as though her mind was drifting through places I couldn't follow. It struck me how natural it felt to stand there beside her, how little effort it took to simply exist in her presence. Usually, conversations at weddings drained me, each word rehearsed, each laugh forced. But here, nothing was forced. You ever think, she asked suddenly, her voice almost drowned by the storm, that some people are meant to cross paths, even if just for a moment? I turned that over in my mind. Sometimes, I admitted, but what if it's more than just a moment? She exhaled, a small breath that sounded almost like a laugh but carried no humor. That's the part that scares me. Moments are safe. They're temporary, fleeting. You can tuck them away and remember them fondly. But more? More comes with risk. Her words struck something deep inside me, a truth I hadn't realized until then. Because she was right. To let this be a fleeting moment would be safer. It would be easier to wake tomorrow, smile at the memory, and carry on with life unchanged. But the idea of letting it fade, of reducing this connection to nothing more than a story to tell myself years later, felt unbearable. I don't want safe, I said quietly, almost more to myself than to her. But she heard. She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a heartbeat. Then she said, "You don't even know what you're asking for." Maybe not, I admitted, but I know what I'd regret if I didn't try. Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but instead, she fell silent. I could see the war behind her eyes, the tug of caution against the pull of something deeper. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't alone in this feeling. She felt it too. The rain began to ease, softening from its furious downpour to a gentle patter. The air smelled fresher, cooler. I noticed then that she had stepped a fraction closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her. Our shoulders touched fully now, not just in fleeting brushes. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The world had shrunk to this. Her beside me, the storm fading around us, and the undeniable truth that something extraordinary had taken root in the most ordinary of places. And I knew, with startling clarity, that I couldn't let this night end as if it were nothing. By the time the rain had softened into a delicate drizzle, the courtyard looked transformed. The stones glistened as though polished. The fountain overflowed gently with rainwater, and the air carried that unmistakable scent of freshness, the smell of beginnings. Inside the hall, the wedding was still in full swing, laughter and music spilling faintly through the open doors. But for us, that world felt distant, like a place we had left behind hours ago. We stayed beneath the veranda, neither of us willing to break whatever fragile thread was holding us together. The glass of champagne she had set aside earlier now stood forgotten, beads of water trickling down its surface. She crossed her arms loosely, not from cold, but as though she were bracing herself. "I don't usually do this," she said suddenly. "Do what?" I asked. "Stand outside in the rain with a stranger. Share more than I should with someone I've just met." She paused, her gaze searching mine. "It feels reckless." I let her words settle before I answered. "Maybe it's not reckless. Maybe it's exactly what was supposed to happen." She smiled at that, though it was a small, cautious smile, the kind someone gives when they want to believe you but aren't ready to admit it. "You talk like you've already decided what tonight means." "Maybe I have." There was a beat of silence, the kind that felt heavier than any noise. She turned her face slightly, watching the rain again, and I could tell she was fighting something inside herself. A voice of doubt, perhaps, or the instinct to retreat. But she didn't. She stayed. "I've spent so long convincing myself not to expect things from people," she confessed quietly. "It's easier that way. You don't get disappointed. You don't have to wonder if you're asking too much." Her vulnerability hung in the air, fragile but unashamed. I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. "And what if, just this once, you don't have to convince yourself of that?" Her eyes met mine again, and there was no mistaking it this time. The flicker of hope, the pull she was trying not to surrender to. I could feel it, the invisible tether drawing us closer, stronger with every heartbeat. The drizzle slowed, the storm nearly spent. Beyond the veranda, the night stretched out, quiet and endless. For a moment, I imagined reaching out, taking her hand, and leading her away from all of it, the wedding, the noise, the obligations. Just the two of us, somewhere the world couldn't find us. I didn't move, though, because sometimes anticipation is its own kind of magic. And in that suspended moment, with the storm behind us and the night ahead, I realized I didn't just want one evening with her. I wanted every evening that could follow. When we finally stepped back inside, the world felt brighter, louder, almost overwhelming after the quiet cocoon of the rain. Music swelled around us, a lively mix of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft shuffle of dancing feet across the parquet floor. But for me, everything blurred at the edges. My attention stayed tethered to her. Every glance, every subtle shift of her shoulders, the way her fingers brushed against the fabric of her dress as though grounding herself. The reception was winding into that stage of loosened ties and undone hair, where people surrendered to the night with fewer inhibitions. Groups gathered around the bar, jokes turning into stories, stories into slurred confessions. Yet, despite the energy, I felt strangely detached from it all, as though the evening had split into two realities, theirs and ours. She must have sensed it too, because she leaned closer, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "It feels different now, doesn't it? Like everything in here is just noise." I nodded. Maybe we left part of ourselves out there, in the rain. Her lips curled in the faintest smile, but there was something in her eyes, a shadow of hesitation. It was then I noticed a man at the far side of the room, his gaze fixed on her with a familiarity that unsettled me. He wasn't part of the bridal party, not one of the easy, laughing guests I'd seen earlier. His stare wasn't casual. It was searching, almost possessive. She noticed him a second later, and the change in her was immediate. Her shoulders stiffened, her breath caught, and for the first time since we'd met, she stepped back slightly, as though retreating into herself. "Do you know him?" I asked quietly. Her silence was louder than any answer she could have given. Finally, she whispered, "I hoped he wouldn't be here tonight." A chill ran through me. cutting through the warmth of the champagne and music. "Who is he?" Before she could respond, the man began moving through the crowd, weaving his way closer, a deliberate predator's pace masked beneath polite smiles and nods. She reached instinctively for my hand, and without thinking, I tightened my grip around hers. "You don't have to tell me yet," I said, my voice firm. "But if you want me to get you out of here, just say the word." Her eyes met mine, wide and uncertain, but somewhere inside that uncertainty was relief. For the first time all evening, I felt the stakes shift. This wasn't just a fleeting connection anymore. It was a line drawn in the sand. The man was nearly upon us, his presence impossible to ignore. She squeezed my hand once, quick and tight, as if bracing herself, and I knew then, whatever this night had begun as, it was about to become something else entirely. The man's approach slowed as he drew near, but his eyes never left her. I felt the tension coil in the space between us, thick and electric. She stayed by my side, her hand still in mine, but I could feel the subtle tremor of uncertainty in her fingers. Something had changed in an instant. The delicate balance of our night had shifted, and now it was a matter of choice, of courage, of risking everything for a moment that might never come again. "Stay close to me," I murmured, more to steady myself than her. She nodded, her eyes searching mine for reassurance, and I gave it as best I could with a steady squeeze of her hand. The man stopped just a few feet away, a polite but cautious smile on his face, though his intent was anything but harmless. She whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "I didn't think I could feel this way tonight. Not here, not with everything around us." "I know," I said. "Me neither. But maybe some things don't wait for the perfect moment. Maybe the perfect moment is the one we're in right now." Her gaze met mine, and I saw it. The same spark that at first pulled me toward her across the crowded hall, the same recognition of something neither of us could name, the same quiet understanding that this connection was no longer a fleeting encounter. The man glanced between us, a question in his eyes, but we didn't answer. We didn't need to. I led her gently away from the edge of the crowd, toward the exit and the quiet of the courtyard, and as we stepped outside, the cool night air enveloped us like a protective cloak. The sounds of the wedding faded behind us, replaced by the subtle rustle of leaves and the distant echo of the fountain. We stopped under a tree, rain-soaked but laughing softly at the absurdity of our escape. In that moment, words felt unnecessary. I leaned slightly closer, feeling her warmth, and she didn't move away. Our eyes met, holding a promise neither of us had spoken aloud, a vow that the night had given us something far greater than we could have imagined. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if we would ever find ourselves here again. But I did know one thing. In a crowded hall full of strangers, among the noise and the celebration, I had found something astonishingly quiet yet impossibly strong, her. And as we stood there, dripping from the rain, hearts still racing, I realized that weddings would never look the same to me again. They weren't just celebrations of others anymore. They were reminders that fate has a strange way of playing its hand in the most unexpected places. That night, the world shifted, and I had found something I would carry with me forever. The certainty that some connections are meant to change everything, even in a single evening.